Hey there guys, this is going to be part 3 of the travel trailer project, and today I'm going to get you caught up on everything that I've completed since part 2 of the build, which admittedly has taken quite a bit longer than I originally anticipated. Just lots of little fine detail things that I'm having to learn along the way or as I do them. And then at the end I will talk about what is to come in the next phases of this project, as well as a special edition t-shirt that I'm having made for this build, in case anybody wants something cool to remember this process by. So let's get started. Now, the first thing I wanted to achieve on this third phase of the build was to begin by installing the door. This might not have been the most chronologically right thing to do, but it was a big moral victory just to have a functioning door on it. Really made it feel like a trailer. I installed it with butyl tape and sheet metal screws, and then I trimmed the tape off with a pizza cutter, and it actually worked quite well. After I got the door installed, it was then time to start the insulation. For this I used a product called R-Max. It's a foam board that is lined with aluminum foil that is supposed to be really resistant to high temperatures, as well as having a good R value. And I simply used my VHB tape to essentially stick it to the outer skin. These curved sections were made possible by just running the insulation through my table saw. Once all the insulation was in place, I then sealed all of the gaps with canned foam, and once that cured, this stuff was pretty much locked into place. Now, one of my biggest concerns during this whole entire process was to make sure this trailer is absolutely weather tight. And to do this, I first started off by caulking all of the corner seams and overlapping joints with a permanent lap sealant. And then on the roof over all of those joints, I then added a 4-inch wide seam tape. In addition to the corner sealant, I then followed that up by adding another type of sealant tape that is specifically designed for corners and roof-to-wall edges. This stuff is incredibly sticky, has a lifetime warranty, and is supposed to remain flexible and sticky pretty much for life. Once everything was sealed up, it was time to add the aluminum trim. This not only gives a sharper look, but also gives some protection to the edges and corners. And much like the earlier parts in this build, this was supplied to me by my local industrial metal supply, so as always, a big shout out and thanks to them. Before installing the trim, I first added a couple of layers of butyl tape so as to seal behind the penetrations that the sheet metal screws would eventually make when installing the trim. Much like the front curve section in part 1 where my father-in-law helped me bend the steel tubing, these curved trim pieces were no different. I had to seek the assistance of a guy in Tucson by the name of Doug Thompson, amazing metal crafter. He had a jig and was able to bend this tubing actually out of square stock, and then I brought them home and cut the angled pieces out of it and then sanded for about 4 hours to get the final fit, but the end result I think looks pretty darn good. And the front rock guard, believe it or not, is attached with nothing more than VHB tape. I know, probably to the dismay of many, but it's a pretty thin piece of aluminum just to keep the pebbles and rocks from dinging up the front. To install the trailer lights, I first had to add a wooden backing in all of the areas where the lights were going to go. Since the trailer is essentially just a frame with aluminum skin and a little foam board on the back, they needed something to mount to. Once I had all my holes drilled, I then added butyl tape to the back of each one of the lights as a weather seal, and then started installing them on the trailer. Once I had all my lights in place, I then proceeded to wire everything together. It's not a super complex process, it's essentially just matching colored wires together according to a trailer wiring diagram and then making sure everything is grounded properly. I then ran all of my wires low to the ground where I'm thinking a baseboard will eventually cover them up. That way I will always have access to them if I ever have issues with the trailer wiring. And it all ends up in the front left corner of the trailer, which will eventually be under one of the seats where I can have access to that bundle. And in the end, the lights worked, so I guess that's all that matters. Okay, so at this point, I pretty much have all my insulation in and all of my basic trailer wiring run, and I'm just about at the point where I can add the interior walls so that I can then add windows into all of the window openings, which is something I've been wanting to do for a while. But I've run into a little bit of a change of plans, and let me show you the reason for that now. The first plan change has to do with this rear window right here. I had originally framed it up for what I thought was going to be an emergency exit window that I was getting off of eBay. Well, when I got it in, I realized it was definitely not an emergency exit window. So I went ahead and got another one off of eBay, which came in and was a great window, but it was bigger in the opening, so I had to make it a little bit wider and a little bit taller to accept the new window. But the new window frame was actually designed for almost a 2-inch finished wall. So I had to fur this entire wall out so that it would be able to accept the window frame. And when I was looking at that, I figured, well, I might as well add insulation into this extra area. And that led me to start reconsidering how I was going to run my 12-volt wiring along the sidewalls. The reason I was thinking about running the 12-volt wiring in the walls is because I figured I had a little bit of a gap between the 1 inch of insulation on the wall and the 1.5 inches of framework. I figured I could run all the wires in that little open area, and that way none of the connections would get squished once the wallboard was on. But then I figured if I was adding the extra insulation on the back, why not add an extra 1/2 inch on all of the walls, since I really wasn't going to have any fixtures on the walls, and then just fur out the ceiling a little bit, run all the wires in the ceiling, as well as add a little bit of insulation. And that's what I'm going to do now. And there is the finished wall with the second layer of insulation. Now both side walls as well as the back wall have 1.5 inches of this insulation, just like the ceiling. The ceiling will be getting another layer once I get the 12-volt wiring run, but that probably won't happen until next video. And you will notice that I've left the electrical connections still cut out so I can have access to those wires. One of the last steps before installing my windows was to add my wallboard, and for this I used 1/8 inch plywood, also known as Luan or utility plywood. It's not necessarily the highest grade, but I did seal it pretty well on the backside, and it will be getting a coat of some sort of paint before I install the cabinets. But before installing the windows, I did decide to add an aluminum accent stripe. A lot of people asked about the middle seam that was showing, and this is what I was always kind of thinking about, adding something to cover it up, and I think it looks pretty darn sharp. And the very last thing I did do was to install the windows, and for this I just used butyl tape on the outside edge of the window and a clamp ring on the inside. I may decide to put a sealant on the upper half of the outside window, but I'm just not sure just yet. All right, so that's pretty much going to do it for all the progress in this part. Now I'm going to take the camera, walk you around the outside and inside, talk about maybe some of the things I didn't show in that progress footage, as well as talk about the things that will be coming in the next part. Okay, so I'll first start off with the back. This side is pretty much finished just as it stands right now. I love the way the aluminum stripe looks with the lights as well as with the angled section down below. And I can already tell that we are going to get a ton of benefit out of that emergency exit window. It opens fully, so I know it's going to provide a ton of great ventilation when we're camping. But the one area where I'm still kind of considering things is this area down below here. I'm thinking about possibly making a bumper that comes out from below that will have a couple of reverse lights and another set of tail lights just for safety, but I'm not totally sure just yet. Moving on over to the action side of the trailer, this is probably where most of the future exterior improvements will happen. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be building some sort of slide out that comes out that door right there, like a table or something. I still need to figure out some sort of awning, whether buy one or make one, and then I will be putting some steps down here. Moving to the front of the trailer, I did not show it, but I ended up installing a tongue jack right at the end of the trailer tongue. I just welded a 1/4-inch steel plate and bolted a jack directly through there. I was originally going to just weld the jack on, but to the advice of a lot of you guys in the comments, I decided to bolt it. So now if it ever gets damaged, I can easily replace it. And that little red foot down there flips up when the jack is retracted. As for the space behind the jack, that will eventually get a custom tongue box made with the same style aluminum diamond plate that is on the front of the trailer. Moving on over to the far side, there's not a whole lot that will happen to this side. The only thing I really anticipate doing is adding some sort of water and electrical hookups to go into the kitchen area. And then one other thing I didn't point out is that I will eventually get some rubber trim to fill in those gaps between the fender and the trailer body. And on the inside, I plan on starting the interior cabinets, running the 12-volt wiring, and basically just figuring out the interior layout. The ceiling isn't walled in right now just because I plan on running the 12-volt wires through the ceiling and down into the cabinets. I also need to finish up boxing the wheel wells in. As you can see, I've just added a little bit of aluminum, but there is an open space where you can see the fender right there. And if you're wondering about the interior, this is not 100% set in stone, but a quick synopsis is that this back little area right here will be some sort of couch or bed for mom and dad. There will be cabinets up along the ceiling for clothes. This far wall across from the door will be the kitchen cabinets and the kitchen countertop with sink. This wall will be a shower or bathroom kind of stall thingy. I'm not exactly sure. And then the front will be a little dinette with a seat here, and a table in the middle, but it all fold down for my daughter's bed. And I don't know. Oh, and then there will be a shelf up there. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for this part of the build. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with the way everything's turning out. So far, it is pretty close to my original sketches. As for the time frame that this whole project is taking, definitely way longer than I originally anticipated. I was hoping to have it done later this month or early into August, but I think it's pretty apparent that is not going to happen. As for the t-shirts I mentioned earlier, a company called bonfire.com contacted me, and they do promotional t-shirts where I will make a few bucks off of each shirt sale. So they asked if I wanted to do it, and I said, okay, maybe I'll do a special edition for the travel trailer. So this is what they are. If you guys are interested in having one of these shirts, it has my logo on the front, and then on the back it has my original travel trailer sketch. They actually cleaned that one up, but that was just from my original drawing of what I thought the trailer would look like. I will post a link down below. It's going to be open for 2 weeks, and if you want a shirt like that, definitely check it out. I will make a few bucks off of it, and maybe you'll have a cool keepsake if you like this project. As for the next part, I think I talked about all of the next stages that are hopefully coming up. And that's pretty much it. So as always, guys, I appreciate you watching. Give me a thumbs up if you liked this. Check me out on Instagram, and until the next stage of the travel trailer, I'll probably see you on a rainwater harvesting project. See ya.